To cover this topic today about positioning content. Looks like there is not enough time for me, but let me start with its theory a bit. All right. So first thing is, guys, that we kind of tried to create layout today, okay, using the Pox property, and we will keep on doing this. So we'll read some theory about positioning as well and try to create some layouts after reading this theory. Okay. So basically in these couple of classes we'll fix the layout of our website, and then we'll add designs to like font style, colors, and all those kind of things, background colors and all that kind of stuff to our website, which will make it look even better. All right. So now when we talk about positioning, so positioning can be done in a lot of ways. There are a lot of things via which people do positioning or have an attempt at doing positioning, and this is really really important because often I have seen people struggle with this positioning, because you can go and apply a font size or a background color or a font color, or a border to various elements. I mean, that is very easy, right? The actual theory or the actual wonders lie in creating these positional layouts so that the content should appear wherever you want it to appear. All right. Yeah, you can give shadows to the button, Sridhar. All right, now, so let's discuss about positioning a bit. Okay, so the first thing that we use in positioning are called as floats. Okay, so floats means float property of CSS. Okay, so it is pretty versatile and it can be used in a various different number of ways. The float property. So essentially, the float property, it allows us to take an element, remove it from the normal flow of the page, and position it to the left or right of its parent element. Okay, so let's say there is an element. So like in this particular case, uh, uh, like can you see the presentation, guys? All right. Yeah, so basically let's say this aside section, as you can see over here, right? So this aside section, let's say you want now you have a one section element and you have one aside element. So you want this aside element uh, and the section element, both of them, to come on a single line, and while they are coming on the single line, you want this aside element to be floated right. Okay, so what happens, so you can in this aside element you can declare a style. You can say for this particular aside element, you can say float is equal to right. Okay, and it will be floated to the right. Okay, and what will happen is that the section element, it will just wrap around this aside element. So as I told you earlier, aside elements are normally usually done for, let's say you want to add a let's say a writer's bio to a blog, or some other kind of section which is not totally related to this blog but is a good information about someone who is writing the blog or something else in general, right? That is why we used aside sections. And you this aside section, so just think of your normal I don't know, some kind of newspaper which comes to your home, Times of India, or any other kind of newspaper. So you might have seen that there is a 3-column layout, okay, or a 4-column layout where the news is written in those columns. And often in those columns, you see that there is an image and the text is being wrapped around that image, right? So that kind of an effect, how will you create? So floats, this float property, it was actually created for that kind of an effect. Okay, where let's say this particular image, you float it to the right or the left, and then the remaining text, it will just wrap around that image. Okay, wrap around the available width there is. Okay, so that is the purpose, that was why the float property was created. So in this particular thing, so let's say I have a one column, so what I can do is I can put that image in this aside element, right? And the section will have all the text. I mean, just keep thinking of that newspaper that you might have seen, where there is a 3 or a 4-column layout kind of a structure, and within one column you see that there is an image and there is some text around that image, written down. All right. So that is what the float property is used to do. All right. So you can float it to the left particular element, or you can float it to the right. Okay. All right. So now let's say if you want this section element in this particular case to be floated left and the side element to be floated right, what you can do is you can, within your, like, you can create a CSS style and say section element float left and aside element float right. Okay. So section element will be floated to left, aside element will be floated to right. Now in background, what CSS, what browser is doing, whichever element you are trying to float, it will remove that element entirely from your HTML code, okay, as if that element never existed in your HTML. Take it out, and whatever is the parent element of this floated element, it will. So let's say if you are saying the child element to be floated right, okay, so the browser will remove this child element altogether from the HTML, and then it will place it to the rightmost, edge of the parent element of this child element. Okay, so this is what browser is trying to do when you say float left or when you say float right. All right. So yeah, so if you have said float left to section and float right to what do you call aside, then this is how it will look. All right. uh, Hope that is clear.